On today's episode of the High Achieving Female podcast, I am excited to introduce you to the number 3 winner on the list of the 50 fastest growing women-led and owned businesses in America, as presented by Women's President Organization and JP Morgan Chase. We're talking to Nicole Wegman, founder and CEO for the Ring Concierge. She's a luxury jeweler based out of New York City, but serves clients globally. We're talking about how she invested just a measly $2,000 to start the brand 10 years ago and has scaled up to serving over 200,000 clients worldwide. We're discussing trust but verify, how she went from doer to decision maker. It's a great episode. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the High Achieving Female podcast, powered by Know, where we believe high achieving female leaders deserve to be known. Here, you're going to get the tips, tools, and inspiration you need to network, grow, scale, and balance your business, career, and life. This is a special series of the High Achieving Female podcast powered by Know, where you'll get up close and personal with the winners of the 50 fastest women-owned and led companies in America, as presented by WPO and JP Morgan Chase. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the High Achieving Female podcast powered by Know. I am so excited to introduce you today to Nicole Wegman, the founder and CEO of the Ring Concierge. Nicole, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you about the Ring Concierge. I love the concept. I was dabbling online, looking at everything that you're offering. And before we jump in, I should say that you are one of the award winners of the 50 fastest woman-owned and led companies presented by Women's President Organization and JP Morgan Chase. So congratulations to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know it's probably a very exciting time seeing how your business has grown over the last 10 years, but let's talk a little bit about the business itself. What is the Ring Concierge?
So we are a fine jewelry brand that started and specializes in engagement rings, but also offers anything and everything fine jewelry you could ever imagine. We have pieces starting at under 100 and going into the 7 figures. So truly anything you could imagine, but everything is fine jewelry, diamonds, gold, platinum, but at very obtainable price points.
Wow, that's a big range from like $100 to $1 million. When we were talking, you specifically mentioned who your target buyer is, and it's the millennial woman, correct?
It is. Our core customer is in her late 20s, early 30s, and she is either looking to get engaged or is recently married. And it's pretty great because 80% of our purchases are actually made by women, which we're really proud of. And even when it comes to engagement rings, although of course her partner is going to be involved in the process and he or she may be the one paying for the ring, the woman is actually very involved in that too. So we really like to make sure we understand our end user and we are speaking to her at all times.
I love that. So what started or what prompted you to start the business?
So I was getting engaged. This was 10 years ago. And my now husband and I were walking up and down the Diamond District, trying to figure out, how does this work? What do I like? And the experience was pretty bad. And I think any New Yorker who has gone in the Diamond District probably feels the same way. I can't believe this is the experience and this is how I'm supposed to spend this much money. And alternatively, there were the heritage brands up and down Fifth Ave, which are beautiful and a great experience, great service offering, but unaffordable. Most people cannot afford to shop in those stores. And there kind of was nothing in between. And so I came up with this concept about creating a jewelry company and, more importantly, a brand that actually understood the millennial woman who is, or especially at that time was the end user and the average age of getting engaged, And the other big piece of it is the diamond industry is historically male dominated and family run. And so it's typically, someone's grandpa passing it down to their dad, and then they take it over. And it's just very little innovation and very little women in the industry, which I found crazy because we're the end user. So the company was founded with a focus on how millennial women actually want to shop today, and also making sure that we are female founded and female led and run.
I love that. I mean, I find this so true. And when we look at the power of the pocketbook, right? And it's the women who are making these decisions, especially in this day and age. I mean, when women are getting engaged or they're looking for like a special piece, they want to be involved in that process. So I think it's so exciting that you're actually speaking to us, right? The women, and how amazing it is. I'm obviously very proponent of buying from a woman. It's for us, by us type of mentality. And one of the things that you had mentioned was the transparency within your brand and your messaging, and probably some education that is more than just the C's and like the color cut clarity, right? So talk a little bit about the transparency and maybe what a quick tip that you could share for anyone who's on the prowl for a new diamond.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Transparency is one of our core values and what we focus on. It's an industry that kind of has a bad stigma. I think people always think they're getting ripped off if they're going to buy a diamond or jewelry. And we wanted to break the mold and make it really clear that you can trust us. So we do that in so many ways. One of the easiest ways we do it is just by showing the behind the scenes. Who's the team? What are we working on? What does our office look like? Who am I? What do I care about? Right? Like step one is understanding who you're buying from. And then in terms of transparency and education, we talk a lot about what should you actually focus on and care about when buying a diamond versus what do you think you should care about when you're maybe doing some preliminary research. So the 4 C's is a perfect starting point, because you have to remember at the end of the day, that is the grading certificate, but doesn't necessarily mean the diamond's beautiful. You could be a colorless, flawless diamond, but be cut in such a way that you don't sparkle, you don't have the right light scintillation. So there's so many nuances that aren't captured in this piece of paper. And we talk to clients about, okay, yes, that's all nice. And you can pay a ton of money to have a perfect diamond on paper, but who really cares if it's not pretty? And here are the things you might actually want to care about. And one of the things that most women care about, if we're being honest, is getting the biggest diamond possible.
Yes. So, I love that you said that.
Yeah. What can we give on so we're not spending over budget, and allocate that budget towards carat weight? And so you want to think about how big the diamond spreads. That's going to be the measurement that faces up, because a carat weight is a weight. It's not an indicator of the dimensions. So we focus a lot on the dimensions and making sure you're not paying for a diamond that's too deep, because once it's set, you're never going to see the bottom of the diamond and you're kind of wasting your money.
This is great. I mean, this is what great advice. And I actually too have heard this as well. And so let's go back to when you were a shopper, right? You were the shopper, you were the client, you found that you were not happy with what was out there in the market. So you decided to create this on your own. What did that conception look like? So from, wow, we've got to do something to change the landscape, to actually launching the Ring Concierge.
So this is about 10 years ago, so it's starting to become blurry, but
that's okay.
I did not go to business school. I didn't think this was going to become the size company it is today. I was working in fashion and didn't like it anymore. And I really wanted to have autonomy and create a company where I could basically just replace my salary. I kind of told myself, if I can bring home after taxes the same amount I made when working in the buying office at Bloomingdale's, great, I'm cool with this. And that is really as simple as it was in my head. So the first steps were being pretty lean financially, because I was not at all thinking about investors. And I needed to educate myself on diamonds. So I took some courses at GIA, which is a gemology educational institution. And I started to ask around within the Diamond District, how does this work? Who could I possibly trust here? And kind of found myself a mentor. I literally filed for an LLC on LegalZoom for like $400 and bought the URL for the website and made it myself in, I don't even know what the platform was. So it was scrappy.
Right. You were scrappy.
Like the definition of scrappy. And I found clients two ways. One, just word of mouth, because, I was a 26-year-old living in New York City. So half my friends were about to get engaged. So that was wonderful and free. And then I used Instagram. And that doesn't sound like such a novel idea today, but it actually was 10 years ago. This was pre-Instagram even having business accounts or a paid component. It was just when we all used it for our own personal accounts. And so I was probably one of the first people in jewelry to create an account with jewelry on it. And so it blew up really fast, which was great because it was free marketing and customer acquisition. And those were kind of the early years. That's really how I did it while I was figuring it all out.
Wow, that's incredible. And so $2,000, you bootstrapped all the way for the last 10 years, $2,000 sort of initial investment. I love that you went and sought out the education, you sought out a mentor. I can only imagine how challenging that was, trying to penetrate a male dominated industry. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of mentorship, especially in this type of industry.
So it's not the type of industry where you can go major in college and walk away and say, okay, I understand how to navigate the diamond district and, all the diamonds being imported from Israel and how all of this works. Like, it doesn't exist. So you do have to figure out who you can learn from. And that is why it's typically held within these families, because these learnings are passed down and you have to really trust who you're speaking to. It's very much a handshake industry. So they need to know who you are and that they can trust you and vice versa. So that's where the mentor came into play. And he was younger and kind of got what I wanted to do. And basically I approached him with a deal and said, look, if you let me use your office, first of all, because I couldn't afford to build out an office, and help me figure this out and help me get diamonds in, I will split the profits with you for any engagement ring I sell. And that's how I did it in the opening years, which was great because I had no overhead. I used all of his tools, his team, his office. And then on the flip side, he got 50% of anything I sold. And it was profitable year one. So he made money. And I just kind of observed and learned and picked the brain of the people around me until I figured out, okay, I understand now. This is the flow with customers. This is how sourcing diamonds work. This is, how pricing all works. And that's what I did for many years, actually.
Wow, that's incredible. And this company, like we said, it's about 10 years old, and you have grown to from yourself and a mentor to 65 employees. You've got 2 retail stores. Bridal is clearly, you have a whole bridal area, but you also do this fine jewelry, pearls and earrings and rings and beautiful pieces. I have to ask you, when you were looking for this mentor that you ultimately found and really changed the landscape for you and your trajectory, what were some of those things you were looking for? So if you were to give someone some advice, maybe a newbie business owner that's listening to this episode, what would you say to them? What are some of those core components or characteristics that they should be looking for that you are also looking for and ultimately found?
For me, what was so important is finding somebody who was more in line with my aesthetic. And I know that's like a very specific thing, but when you're selling something that people wear, I wanted to find somebody I could work with and trust, not just in learning the ins and outs of the industry, but also that kind of understood how important the aesthetic component was and the branding piece was. Because I knew that for me, that was what was going to set us apart. And if this person didn't get it at all, which by the way, is a lot of people in the industry, they don't have necessarily amazing taste, even though they're creating jewelry. I just knew that I couldn't learn from them long-term. And so that was a big piece of it. So I guess in that regard, the things that you really care about, make sure they also are focused on those things so that there's not this misalignment in what you're both marching towards. And also, for me in this industry, I needed someone kind of closer to my age who understood the power of social, understood that being digitally native was going to be really important in an industry that was typically very brick and mortar. And he got all those things. And that's why it really worked well.
Yeah, that's great advice. Of course, I think alignment is key. In the early days, talk a little bit about how, and even now, how do you source? I mean, you're not the maker, right? So you're not custom making these pieces, are you?
So we do not cut diamonds. We do handle the manufacturing all of the pieces we make. But when it comes to the diamonds and sourcing the diamonds, we source from so many places. We have a very large sourcing team, and they are dedicated to just the ins and outs and the flows of all the diamonds for our clients who are looking to make custom engagement rings. Because the way it works is you jump on the phone with us and you say, okay, here's my budget, here's what I care about. And we'll say, okay, here are some tips that we would like to recommend. Great. And then we curate a diamond assortment just for you based on your preferences and budget and our expertise. So we'll show you 5 diamonds, even though you're only going to buy 1. And those are curated and sourced just for you. So the operations in that flow is pretty intense. And so we have so many sources, both nationally and internationally, on where we're getting all of our diamonds and goods from.
That's incredible. And your buyers, they're from all over, I'm assuming.
All over. We're primarily in the US, but we certainly service international clients all the time. The majority of our customers tend to be in the major metro areas, New York, LA, Dallas, Chicago, kind of the bigger cities.
And when we were talking a little bit about how your marketing and how you were able to connect with those buyers initially, you said it was, the power of social media, and you're still very much focused on this as a strategy. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I love this approach and the way that the world is sort of changing towards social media, where historically you would just go to your local diamond dealer or your local jewelry store. Maybe you would fly up to New York, but you would actually source this in person. How does working through Meta and Instagram and Facebook, how has this changed the trajectory of how you've been able to grow?
Well, you bring up a good point. Historically, people would have to go to their local jeweler. And what we've done is created this brand in this community using social media, where people connect with us and specifically me, and we kind of are that local jeweler in their mind. And what's pretty wild is 50% of our engagement rings, they're actually sold to remote clients sight unseen. Obviously, we're sending them pictures and videos. They visually have seen something, but for a purchase that when I started this company, everybody told me nobody's going to buy an engagement ring online. No one's going to buy a ring remotely. You have to be local. We've kind of disproven that. If they trust you enough and you educate them and you have the right visuals and experience to offer, you can create a really great remote business doing what we do. And that is one of the ways we are able to scale a product that used to be really tough to scale outside of specific geographic local areas.
I think that's incredible. And you have somewhere in the neighborhood of over 200,000 clients in the last 10 years. I mean, it's remarkable. You're definitely able to reach people in a way right beyond those, that old school mentality of, I just have to source with the people that are in my neighborhood or who are just beside me. Would you say that most of your clients are coming from Instagram or searches or referrals or combination?
Instagram and referrals are our 2 biggest forms of customer acquisition. And so we certainly focus a lot on those. And the referral piece we're really proud of, because obviously that means that our customers are having a good experience with us. They're happy with the product, they're happy with the quality. And we care a lot about making sure all of those things are being done right.
Absolutely, for sure. I love that. And this episode of the High Achieving Female Podcast is brought to you by the Business Growth Academy. Growing a business can be overwhelming, confusing, and lonely. Time and financial freedom feel hard to achieve, but it doesn't have to be that way. Vanessa Shaw is the go to business coach and mentor for ambitious women who are ready to be the real CEO and scale their business to enjoy more money, more impact, and more freedom. If you want to free up at least one day a week, at a minimum of six figures in new business, and pay yourself more, reach out to her at businessgrowthacademy.com to chat about scaling without sacrificing what's most important to you. Now back to the show. So talk to us a little bit about the journey. I want to move into like Nicole herself and the journey of becoming this founder and CEO of a very large, well-known company. What you're married, you've got a 2-year-old, you're juggling mama life and work life. How is that going for you?
It's a lot. It's a lot. My husband's also an entrepreneur. I have a 2-year-old. We are so busy, but I'm the type of person that kind of has to be busy. I don't do well being bored. So I guess, entrepreneurship suits that piece of it well. But really, I thought I loved the fashion industry and that I wanted to be in it. And I spent 6 years in the industry, both at Macy's and Bloomingdale's, and realized when I looked at my boss and my boss's boss, I didn't want their jobs. And I wasn't sure what that meant. I didn't think that, I need to be an entrepreneur. I need to come up with this idea. It really did just kind of come to me at the perfect time when I was trying to make a change in my career, but wasn't sure what that meant. And then simultaneously had this experience in the Diamond District. And I think that really worked out well because there wasn't a motivation beyond creating something that filled a void. And because I didn't take on investment, I had no choice but to be very fiscally responsible. Mm-hmm. So there was a ton of learnings in those early years. It was kind of like business school accidentally that were really, really cool. And things have evolved so much since then. The things I focused on then are very different than what I focus on now. And I didn't expect that shift to happen. And every single year, kind of what I have to do and my role and my focus continues to evolve, which is also a super interesting challenge to work through as a founder.
Absolutely. And let me ask you the question, because I think that there are a lot of people who listen to this, primarily female founders, early stage and aspiring business owners. Some have product-based businesses and inventory, and some are just simply service-based. But for those who are bootstrappers, just like you, maybe they're considering outside investments. Maybe they're considering looking for, partners and that sort of thing. What was it that you didn't need it? You made a very intentional decision not to bring on investors or outside funding. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It was not a conscious decision. It just didn't cross my mind. I think if I were to start another company today, I don't know what my decision would be around funding, to be honest. Obviously, you move a lot slower in the beginning when you don't have outside capital because you have to be really careful. But this was right at the beginning, I'd say, of this whole D2C entrepreneur founder boom that took place. And so the conversations weren't really happening and the podcasts weren't there that, the resources that we all have today to think about, what would I do if I built a company? They didn't exist.
Right.
So it didn't even cross my mind to try to think about investment. I read the book, The Lean Startup, and I was like, okay, I guess this is how you do a startup. Like literally that's all I used. But I'd say for those that are looking to raise, I have a couple pieces of advice because I've certainly gone down the path of exploring what raising capital would look like in recent years to know my options. We're in a place where we don't need to. That's amazing that we can continue to fuel the growth through our own profits. But I also don't want to be in a position where I'm uneducated. And if we did want to raise, I wouldn't know what to do. So from a lot of people I've spoken to who have raised and exited and have had really incredible companies, very impressive female founders, you need to make sure you partner with the right investors. You want to make sure they believe in you and that you can trust them. If you can get some strategy out of your investors, that's amazing. It'd be nice to use them for more than just money. But from what I've heard, you perhaps shouldn't totally expect that to be as helpful as you'd like it to be. So don't raise capital with the expectation that they're going to help you grow the business and give you all this strategic advice, because it may not happen and you may be disappointed by that. The other piece of it is to make sure you're still thinking about profitability. And now everyone's talking this way, ever since the economy kind of shifted. Prior to 2 years ago, no one cared about profits, right? It was just revenue growth above all else. And so there, as we all know now, these high growth, extremely unhealthy, unprofitable businesses that got really big and everybody thought were really, really cool. And then, that kind of fell apart. And so even if you raise whatever it may be, $30 million and you think, wow, I can do whatever I want. World's our oyster. Let's get a great office, hire all these people, spend a ton on marketing. I would really advise you to think about how to create a financially healthy business, because you're going to get to a point where you blow through that capital. And then what company look like? And you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be on this hamster wheel of raising to survive, as opposed to using that initial investment to build something that can then live on its own.
Oh, I love this. It's great advice. Tell me, what was your first hire? Who was your first hire? What's the first thing that you outsourced?
Oh my, okay, I'll never forget. Her name was Tiffany. And in her interview, she said, my name is Tiffany. So obviously I'm perfect for the job because, Tiffany's. And I was like, okay. She was so great. She was really young. We worked out of my apartment, literally. This is when I had it was probably 3 years into the business. And I decided I wanted to start the website and not just offer engagement rings. And obviously launching an e-commerce site with goods, with inventory is very different than made to order custom bridal pieces.
Right.
So that piece of the business, we ran out of my apartment. We shipped boxes out of there. She helped me navigate customer service requests. She was like, jack of all trades, just kind of did all the little things. But what is something I have learned, had to learn over the years, is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes those hires who are so great for the early years, the ones that are down to do anything and pivot and will, sit on the floor and pack boxes with you, are not always the ones that can handle and evolve with the growth of the company as it starts to professionalize and turn into something bigger. Some can, not all want to. That's maybe not why they signed on. They liked the nimbleness. So we've had to evolve a lot in what we look for in hires as we've grown, because as the business grows, who you need and the culture and what they care about and what you care about definitely changes as well.
Okay, that is my favorite thing anyone has said in a very, very long time on this podcast, because it is the honest to God truth, right? Like, who you start with is not usually who you end with, because I'm a firm believer of seasons and reasons and, and all of that. But as we're growing our businesses, we have to stay agile, but also we want the right butt for the right seat at the right time. And that's really what it's all about. And so I'm so glad you said that, because it's so true. If you're really looking to scale up and you want to, evolve and build and keep growing and reaching the next level, sometimes the person who you're with right now is not going to be able to make that leap with you. And that's okay, right? I mean, I would say we have to get comfortable with that as owners.
You're dead on. And it's really tough in the beginning. The first couple times this happens, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It's really hard, to have to let people go or to lose people when you only have a handful of employees every single time feels like such a loss, and it's emotional. And then you get used to it and you realize this is just part of scaling. This is what every business likely goes through when they're growing, and especially if you're high growth. And it's okay. You need to be aware that it's going to happen and okay when it does happen, and just try to handle it the best way possible so that you can get, to your point, the right butts in the seat so you can continue moving forward.
100%. So let's talk about where you are now. So, I mean, like you even said, and clearly year one, year two, year three, you're scrappy, you're really getting this off the ground. You're doing your best to learn. You're working a ton of hours to really just like get settled into this industry. How does your life look like now as a founder and CEO from, what it looked like even 5, 3, 2 years ago?
My day has shifted. The beginning years you do everything. And I also think that's really important advice for founders.
Agree 100%.
And it's even if like, obviously now there are so many roles in the company that I have no business being a part of. I've never had their skill set, like a developer or whatever it may be. But I did run Shopify in the beginning years, right? And I know it's like a very different level, but like having touched all the departments puts me in a position where I understand what they need a lot better. And so my role now, instead of being a doer, is that I'm more of a decision maker. And many of the teams roll up into me, and I spend my entire day in meetings and really just having to think through critically, what does the business need? What do we need this minute, which is often how my time is spent. I'd like to spend more time on thinking about what do we need in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years from now. But the reality is there's always some fire being put out, and just helping guide everybody and making sure the strategy is in place and that we are in line to continue growing the way I want us to grow. And that is also a big change, because I think a lot of founders are used to being doers because they've had to be and are very in the weeds. And starting to lift yourself out of the weeds is also a very tough transition, and trying to find people you can trust so that you don't have to micromanage and can start to think higher level.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're you're hitting every point. This is so true. But can you talk a little bit about that transition for you, and then maybe even just offer a piece of advice or insight on how you ultimately went from like doer to decision maker, and through like leadership? Was there leadership training? Was there modeling? Like, what did that look like for you?
I'm kind of still in it, is the reality. There are areas that I've completely handed off, areas that were not my strong suit or not what I was passionate about. And I made sure over the past few years to find individuals to lead those areas that I could trust and that I knew could do it better than I can. And that was really important so that I could shift my focus and priorities on the areas that I do really care about or that need me to still spearhead them. An example would be I kept on marketing, product development, merchandising, kind of anything customer facing or having to do with product, because that's where my passion lies. And that's really what the reason for founding the company. But even now in those areas, the business is starting to grow beyond my skill set. So we just hired our first ever CMO, and she's only been here about 2-3 months. So she's still kind of onboarding, because marketing is where I spend probably 75% of my time. So it is an interesting thing for me to hand off what is kind of the most important part of the business to me to somebody else. Mm-hmm. But I think, how can I possibly continue to grow it if I am in the weeds and signing off on every email and every paid ad and every social media post, which I am right now, right? Like I can't do that. It's not sustainable. And it's also not smart for the business. And although I clearly have, a natural knack for marketing, obviously we got it this far, I'm not an expert. And I fully recognize that. And it's at a point where an expert needs to come in and teach me what this area should look like. So that's kind of the transition I'm in right now. And it's very interesting. And it's also definitely not easy to hand off the areas you care the most about.
For sure. And I will say that when we ask this question, even in my own experience, but of many founders, the one thing that most are saying, the last thing to go is the marketing or the sales, because as the founder, you're sort of like the core of the brand. You are the brand for so long. And ultimately you built this vision, right? So a lot of times I'm hearing that people are outsourcing the financial piece, or they're outsourcing the ops, or, the COO type of duties, or the hiring, benefits, those sort of things, but they're retaining a lot of that marketing, the visionary, the things that really go into play that really get it to the user. I think that is such a good idea, because that's how we all sort of are able to stay relevant and agile. Talk a little bit about how you knew when it was time to let something go, within, like you're saying, in order to scale, in order to continue growing this business, that it's time to pass it off. What are some of those signs?
That's a great question. And it's not something you probably realize overnight. But for me, the reason why I wanted to prioritize a CMO this year was because marketing drives a significant piece of our revenue, right? You could argue for some businesses that's driving all the revenue. And we have really lofty goals. And if I'm spending 75% of my time focusing on marketing without a background in marketing and trying to figure out how do we scale, and it's kind of exhausting, to be honest, because I'm supposed to be in charge of the whole company. And now I'm spending 75% of my time doing one thing, but still have to manage the rest, right? So that's exhausting. That's not healthy for the other pieces of the business. And also there's a lot of challenges we're facing, some of the more obvious things like increased costs for paid ads and customer acquisition. And these are things I've never navigated before. And I realized that if I didn't bring somebody in who has experienced some of these challenges before, that we're not going to grow. And I also really wanted to level up our branding and kind of our brand awareness in the world. We want to be a household name. Well, that's going to take a pretty seasoned marketer to come in and navigate how do we achieve that. And it was kind of a slow realization probably last year that I should not be running our marketing department anymore, that we really needed somebody else for this to be their 100% focus, and somebody who has a lot of experience.
I think that's so great. What do you say to someone who's scared? I was literally just having this conversation yesterday. And there are so many women founders and business owners that want to protect their little baby, right? That's their business, is their baby. They want to protect it with all of their heart and all of their might, and they won't allow any release of control. What do you say to founders who are maybe like, oh no, I have to make it perfect. I have to do it. I have to be the one. It's only me.
Look, that is tough. And I have done that in certain areas and I shouldn't. And it's kind of the reality, but I've also done it in areas and I'm glad I did. And so this is where kind of trusting your gut becomes really important. And this is hard to do, but important. When I bring on new people who are supposed to own different areas for me for the first time, I really operate with a trust but verify mentality. You've got to let them show you what they're capable of, but you should not trust them blindly, right? Without kind of any historical knowledge on how they're going to perform. So there is definitely, for example, marketing, a longer onboarding process for this role than there would be for a CTO, for example, where I really am not that involved and I don't understand the technology component. But for this role that I could see myself holding on to for too long, I've basically figured out how to spend a lot of time with her and to onboard her in a different way than I would somebody else, so that I know I'm imparting as much wisdom as I can, and B, I have the opportunity to observe and see, this person and say, wow, I actually can really trust them. I like the way she thought about this. She did this differently than I would have, but it's actually better. And it takes time. It does take time, but it's so necessary, but it's really, really hard.
Oh, I love that. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. You heard it from Nicole. All right. So my last question that I have for you is on the topic of lab grown and sustainability. What are you seeing in the market? What are you seeing in terms of interest? Is this going away? Is it staying? Whether it is through engagement rings, it's through any type of, diamond purchase. What do you see happening sort of on the market?
Such a hot topic. lab grown diamonds are going nowhere fast. They are going to be around. The demand is increasing. It used to be just a tiny, tiny sprinkle of the business. And we've always maintained an offering that whatever you want in an engagement ring, we can make for you because everything is custom. So although all of the jewelry you see on our website is made with natural diamonds, if it's a lab grown engagement ring you want, we'll happily make it for you. So when I first started, I probably did like one every 2 years, for example. And now the demand is daily. We are selling lab grown engagement rings every single day.
Wow.
And really the main motivation for clients in thinking through, do I want a lab grown or do I want a natural diamond, is price, if we're being honest. Lab growns are probably about a third of the price of a natural diamond these days. Don't totally quote me on that because I haven't sold engagement rings to clients many years now, but last I heard from the sales team, it's a pretty big difference. And with all of the pressures of social media, couples really are aiming to hit certain carat weights when they buy a ring. And if they perhaps couldn't hit a 3 carat, let's say, and that's really what they want with their budget with a natural diamond, this is when the conversation typically kicks in. Okay, well, what would a 3 carat cost me in a lab grown? And then we educate them on, here's what they are, here is the differences, here's the financial piece. We cannot at all promise that their value is going to hold because it's a newer product and the prices actually keep coming down. But if they're comfortable with all of that, great, and we'll make them a ring with one. And they're very, very popular right now.
Yeah, good to know. For anyone who's looking at lab grown natural. So natural means it was mined sort of the conventional way, and lab grown, is it just what it says? It's grown in a lab, but are they pretty similar?
It is, the only difference is how they're made. They are both diamonds. They have the same chemical composition. You cannot look at them and be able to tell which is which. It takes very sophisticated equipment and machinery to detect a lab-grown diamond. So from, a consumer standpoint, they are identical in appearance to a natural diamond. And the only difference is one is made in a lab and one is, mined from the earth.
And I think that's what makes them such a great alternative, especially for people who are looking to get more bang for their buck, if you will. Nicole, thanks so much for spending time with us today. If you are listening and you want to, if you have not heard of the Ring Concierge and you want to go dabble around their website, because let me tell you, there are some really amazing things online on their site as well as on their Instagram. And you can shop from there as well. It's Ring concierge.com or on Instagram, Ring Concierge. And if anyone wants to follow you, are you on LinkedIn or how can they connect with you?
Yep, I am on LinkedIn, Nicole Wegman, but you also will, for better or for worse, see my face on our Instagram every day as well.
Amazing. I love that you're still very much involved in the brand and the vision and all of that. And congratulations once again for being one of the 50 fastest growing women-owned and led companies by WPO. It's such a great honor to know you and to be able to keep championing you.
Oh, well, thank you. This was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the High Achieving Female Podcast, powered by No, where we believe it's time for high achieving women like you to be seen, heard, and recognized. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be known.